Is there anyone in the house that can relate to any of that? I kind of tap out pretty early in that video, but yeah, I'm in the 30s where you make a little bit of money and you raise a family and you wonder what happened to your 20s. Even I'm getting a little bit older, old enough to know that, I tell you what, the years that used to seem to take forever are now just starting to tick along quite quick, yeah? And now I understand what you more senior and experienced members amongst us say when you say, time goes fast, make the most of it. I'm starting to get that. I'm starting to see that I'm no longer the young, inexperienced punk pastor who can get away with being immature and childish, because I'm 40 and I'm no longer the youngest pastor in the little cohort that meets. In fact, I'm getting to the middle age. It's depressing. And the violin music that was playing while Billy Crystal speak is currently the soundtrack to my life. My dad would go like this. Do you know what that is? The sound of the world's smallest violin sooking away. Goes fast, doesn't it? Very, very fast. Life goes fast. But have you ever wondered? Now, this is interesting because I am a little bit younger than this point. I still have a windscreen in front of me that I'm looking out. My father-in-law told me once very wisely, he goes, Rob, there comes a point in your life when looking out the front windscreen doesn't give as much joy as looking in the rear vision mirror at what has passed, because what is in front is not as much as what you might hope. So looking backwards and remembering is really, really, it's kind of a blue kind of thing, but let's face it, it's a little bit of a reality. The older we get, the smaller the windscreen in front of us gets and the bigger the rear vision mirror gets behind us. But I wonder if any of you guys have reached that midlife crisis point, or that, when I say guys, I mean women as well. Sorry, it's gender inclusive here. But I wonder if you've got to that point where you go, actually, my life is really humming along here. I am beyond halfway, if statistics are true, and I lived an average kind of life. I'm beyond halfway, if that's the case. What am I doing with it? Like, it is so precious. And it's not to say that you're not grateful for what you've done, and it's not to say any of that stuff, but life is so precious, but it goes by so quick. But God, what do you want me to do with my life? It's already half over. But Jesus had passed away when he was 33 or something, and I'm whatever age you are. What am I doing with my life for you? What are we doing? I found out where I heard it once. When I was younger, I heard someone say that, have you ever thought or asked the question, God, why don't you just zap us off earth the moment we met you? I found out this week that it was actually Rick Warren that said that. I heard that about probably, jeepers, see, now I am getting old, probably 25 odd years ago, and I've never forgotten it. But have you ever wondered why God has left you here? That you're not vaporized, zapped up into heaven to be with him the instant you come to know him. Because when you think about it, everything you can do on earth, just about everything, you can do in heaven, but it'll be far better. You can sing to God in heaven and you'll all sound like real angels. None of that, oh, you sound like an angel, darling, kind of thing. You will sound magnificent. You can probably play golf. In heaven, probably, I don't know. But can you imagine how good you'd be? You can pray in heaven. Imagine how great, imagine how much, when you're in the presence of God to speak to him, how much more boom that would be. Do you know what I mean? It would just be better. Everything would be better in heaven. Why are we still here? Has anyone ever thought that, or is it just me? I just thought life would be better and we can do everything right. But we're here, and Rick Warren says this bit. He said, there's only two things you can do on earth that you can't do in heaven. Can anyone have a quick guess at what they are? You may have heard it before. I think it's in his 40-Day of Purpose book. We've all read that. We can, and yeah, that's one thing we cannot do in heaven, is tell someone about Jesus. We can't do that. What's the other thing? I think I heard it. Sin. So there's only two things on earth that we can do that we can't do in heaven. Which one of those things do you reckon God's left you here to do? Because there's got to be a reason. And I think we can all say that it isn't here to partake in sin, because the whole Bible talks to us about challenging us to renew our minds, to turn away, to repent from those things, to live holy as He is holy. I mean, I don't have to preach a sermon on that. You know that. But there is a purpose for us to be here. A genuine, true purpose. In fact, the very reason your heart was still beating when you met Jesus was because He had a mission for you. He has a purpose for you. He has a plan for you. And it's about sharing Jesus, yeah? It's exciting stuff. It is about sharing Jesus. So for some of you, when I start mentioning evangelism and missions and purpose and all of those things, I can already tell that some of you are thinking about that soft yogurt again, going back to that, and that the music's too loud. Because the reality is, for many of us, sharing our faith or living kind of boldly for Christ is about as fun as going to a dentist and having your teeth drilled. A lot of us just don't like it. A lot of us will avoid it at nearly all costs until we're backed into a situation where actually we have to do something about it. I've got to get this tooth ripped out because it's killing me. Evangelism and mission and purpose and sharing our faith, it's something that we often fear. And I reckon it's because ultimately we've built it up to be something that it was never meant to be, yeah? It was never meant to be a painful experience to share Jesus. It was never meant to be something that's left to the people who know more than you about Jesus, or the people that can speak more eloquently about Him. It was never meant to be left to the people who were trained to do it. It was never meant to be something that you can stuff up, and not do it for fear of stuffing up. That's not what speaking about Jesus and sharing Him was ever meant to be. So I'm going to ask, we are starting, and David mentioned it, 6 weeks, Life on Mission, a series. I'm going to ask you to put all of those fears and those things aside and to be open to hear God speak to you over these next 6 weeks or so. Some of us have been lulled into this sense that God doesn't actually really speak to us. And it's not, we would never say that out loud, but it's just that we'd never expect actually God to speak to us. And I'd put it over these next 6 weeks, not forever when you come to church, but for the next 6 weeks, to be expectant. God does speak. God is still active in the world. His Holy Spirit is still an active presence within your life and wants to speak and nudge you and encourage you into the purpose to which you are here for. Whatever and however that looks like. Because there's one thing that we know. You can read all the self-help books in the world, and the thing is that they talk about that if you find that purpose that resonates with you, it talks about that you will love life. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm just talking self-help guff here, but if you can find a purpose that you that resonates, that you believe in, and all of those things, then you'll live a more fulfilled life. But I'll tell you as a Christian that if we can live the purpose that we are here for, in the way in which He requires me and you and each one to live it, then that would be the most fulfilling, the most wonderful life that we could ever live, because it's fulfilling the designer's purpose for the designed, you and me. There can be nothing more fulfilling than that. So I just encourage you, be open, listen to God, feel Him nudging. You'll find that He might over this next 6 weeks reveal people that are in your life that actually you have, that are non-believers or wherever, that you have a relationship with, in that you can start opening spaces to talk about the things of Jesus. You might find that will happen. So Life on Mission, it goes for 40 days. Something significant about 40 days all the way through the Bible. There's 40 days in a teaching capacity. You got Noah at the start, 40 days it rained while the earth learnt how much God detests sins. 40 years the Israelites are in the wilderness, and they travelled around while God taught them, or they learnt the lessons of what it was to be in Israel, to be Israeli, Hebrew. Jesus spent 40 days in the desert preparing for his ministry before he started out in the wilderness. We believe that this series, it goes for 40 days and 6 weeks. We believe that this can have a massive impact, a really definite flag post, stick a pole in the ground, monument in your life about where your attitude to your mission, your purpose changed. And can you imagine if that happens? Imagine if it happens to everyone in this room. That this 6-week series is one of those moments that you always look back and say, that's where something changed. Can you imagine what this place could look like? And I'm not necessarily talking about Sunday morning. I'm just talking about the ministry of the gospel on the Gold Coast. Imagine what it would look like if we grabbed hold. We believe there's gold in this series. It is a really good series, so be open to it. There's a few things that you've got to do, though, to get the most out of it, yep? So for the next 5 weeks, we're speaking, and you kind of got to prioritise to be here. Now, most of us aren't here for 5 weeks in a row. I've seen the statistics. We're generally about a 2 in 3. So just put that out there. You kind of got to commit to be there. We peek them into a specific order. The series has been written in an order. The last one is prayer, not because it's least important, but because, and the author, Tim Harbaugh, says that he wanted us to know why and what we were praying for more specifically at the end, rather than starting with prayer. He finished with prayer, not out of being importance. You got to get yourself a book. Problem is with that, we've just about sold out. So if you don't have a book, because there's a book that runs along with this, apparently they're available on Kindle. I don't have a Kindle to check that out. I don't know how one works. So you can find the book, Life on Mission. We'll have a copy out the back. You can buy it on Kindle. You've got to have a book. You've got to join a small group, because there's small groups meeting through the week, running through each thing. You'll get the most value out of this stuff if you commit to joining a small group, buying the book and going through it and being here. All right, let's get into it. There's this bloke called Rick Russo, and I'm telling it's him because he came up with this idea. Ephesians 2:8 says, "For it is by grace that you have been saved through faith, and this is not from yourselves, it is the gift of God, not by works, so that no one can boast." It's a favourite, yeah? We all know that one. A lot of us have learnt that one off by memory. You can't earn your salvation, it's a gift. And if you could earn it, well, then we'd all be here flexing our spiritual earning muscles, and we would all act appropriately, giving the appropriate honour to those with the big works muscles and dismissing those with small ones. So we all know this. But this bloke, Rick, he says something that we often forget about this passage, and it's the very next bit, and it says, "For we are God's handiwork, created in Christ Jesus to do good works, which God has prepared in advance for us." Now, we were saved from something for something. We were saved from death and destruction to receive life, but also to pass on the light of life in Jesus. We were saved for a reason. Otherwise, we would be zapped out of here. God has given us a mission, yeah? The Apostle Paul talks about his mission like this: "The most important thing in my life is that I complete my mission, the work that the Lord Jesus has given me to do, to tell the people the good news about God's grace." That's Paul's mission. That's my mission. That's our mission. That is all of us. When it comes down to the most basic point, that is the purpose that we're here for. Jesus told the disciples before he left, "You will be my disciples in Jerusalem and in all Judea and Samaria and to the ends of the earth." The interesting thing with that verse is that the ends of the earth is quite amazing. It's exotic, it's exciting. We send overseas missionaries to these cross-cultural places, and it's fantastic stuff, and they do wonderful work. And I love how at Reedy Creek we are a vibrant supporter of cross-cultural mission. That's fantastic. You know, we're also a supporter of Judea and Samaria. You could say that they're regions of the land we live in. I love the fact that we're being involved in Normanton. You know, we're helping, values of the kingdom being established up there through this house. You know, it's important that we do that. And last week I've had a brain scozzer. Liz, thanks. We had last week here, and she goes into internal kind of northeast, western Queensland and does the fun. It's fantastic that we support and we encourage and we deploy out into those regions. But it also says witnesses in Jerusalem. That's where we are. That's our home. And, Reedy Creek, we have ministries out in Jerusalem as well. But it's so important. God talks about that we will be his witnesses to the ends of the earth. We will be his witnesses to the surrounding regions and areas in which we live. But we also need to be witnesses here at home. And it's here at home first. Starts here, because it starts here and here, right here. Australia, what have I got? Australia, in 1966, 88% of Christians said they identified as Christian. Pretty impressive, 88%. In 2016, that number had reduced down to 51. Now, you might say 51's not too bad, but that's 51% of people put down that they would identify as Christian. Only 1.8 million, which is 7.3% of our population, said that they attend church. So 92.7%, this is based on 24 million population, that means 22.8 million people are not involved in church life. Now, yes, some of those may be wonderful, active, missional Christians who are not involved in an established church setting. That's true. But let's just say there's a million of those. That's generous, I'd reckon. That leaves 21.8 million people that aren't actively involved in a church. The 2016 census revealed that the fastest growing religion in Australia is no religion. It's to believe nothing. That is, across the Western world, the faith of nothing is the fastest growing religion on earth, because it's in the world. Anyway, but for some reason, the church has bought into this culture. We've got a mission field right here. But I often realise for some reason we've bought into this culture and this understanding that actually we send missionaries out to the other places. And that's wonderful. We need to continue to support our missionaries that are sent out. But often I feel like we do that at the expense of understanding ourselves as being sent out right here. And in Australia, if we're not careful, we'll continue to pay for the missionary work in the rest of the world, and that's fantastic. But what is happening here, we can pay for that, but we're losing the battle here. We are losing ground rapidly here, while we've got our feel-good emotions about sending others out and employing them, paying them, giving them the support to do that. There's this bloke, now I've got to say his surname carefully, Peter Drucker. I don't know if you've ever heard of Peter Drucker before. I certainly had. But this guy was a business, the next one blank, yeah. This guy was a consultant, died in, mid-2000s, but he was a business consultant and he wrote on leadership. And someone asked him once, what is the most important ingredient in business? And he summed it up pretty simply. He goes, every day you have to ask yourself two questions. What businesses are we in and how's business? It's pretty simple, isn't it? If you're in business, what business are you in and how is your business? Ask those two questions and you're on your way to recognising what you've got to do to be successful in business. It's brilliant. It is so simple. But it's so poignant because so many people forget what their business is. It's the reality. I can give you two examples. Kodak, we're in the business of producing photos. But when the digital world was being developed and the digital cameras, you all know very well that Kodak hardly lives. And if you're under the age of 20, you might not even know what Kodak is. But Kodak was the preeminent photographic business in the world by far. They lost sight of what their purpose was, and when the world was changing, they didn't change with it. Contrast that to Telstra. Telstra were once a telecommunications business. Government owned back then, yeah, fair enough. They were once a telecommunications business. They're now in the entertainment business. That's why they bought Foxtel. That's why they offer you data. It's not about telecommunications anymore. It's about entertainment. That's why you got a T-Box. That's why they buy those things. That's why Optus bought the rights for the English Premier League. They don't sell telecommunications. They sell entertainment. The business changed, and they changed with it. But our business as Christians, our purpose, it hasn't actually changed, and it never will. It is still to be a witness to Jesus. It will always be. That is always our purpose. Our business is witness. So how's business going? It's a little bit awkward, isn't it? We've got one job, one purpose. The simplest, most basic job, but we sometimes forget. When we have one job, sometimes it's easy to forget. He had one job to put first on that medal. It has third. He had one job. Even Josh knows that that's not Asia. He had one job. There is regret on that one. The car was in the way. Back to school. I don't think you can see that very well. That's knives. Had one job to set up the display for the knives. It's kind of funny. Okay, there's an internet site full of those things. I could have had you here laughing for 20 minutes, I reckon, but it's pretty funny. But when you think about the church in Australia, I've got a feeling that sometimes we forget our one job. And it's awkward. It's awkward. We're in the business of witnessing. How's business? I'm just going to read the yellow bit. Maybe my batteries have gone flat. Can you hit the next slide? Just hit the space bar, it should go. Anyway, it doesn't matter, I'm going to read it. Matthew 9:35. I'm going to read a bit more, but anyway, Jesus went through all the towns and villages, teaching in their synagogues, proclaiming the good news of the kingdom and healing every disease and sickness. When he saw the crowds, he had compassion on them. You know, sometimes I wonder that we just forget our own business because we actually don't care. We don't have the compassion. I don't know. It sounds kind of harsh, but Jesus had compassion on them. There we go. So I'm in the middle there. Because they were harassed and helpless, they're like sheep without a shepherd. Then he said to his disciples, "The harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. Ask the Lord of the harvest, therefore, to send out workers into his harvest field." Now I'm going to show you a graphic. Let's see if this works. Next slide. The graphic isn't there yet. We are the crew in this graphic. We live in the year, say just here, 2000. This is a population graph of the world's population since Jesus' day, year 0. And as you can see here, not a lot of population growth really, is there? I think the wars, the famines, disease, all of those things kind of kept track with the birth rate, essentially. You can look at that. You have a look here in our section of time, how the population growth has just about gone through the roof. And you've got to ask yourself, if the harvest was plentiful back here, what does that make this? If Jesus said that the harvest is plentiful and the workers are few in his time, the harvest is, how would he describe the harvest now? It's massive. We've got a massive task ahead of us. There's heaps of people out there ready to hear the word of God. Tim Harbrow, who is the guy who made this series and in the book that you get, and he says in his book, he says this: the people of the world are more ready to receive, are more ready to receive the good news than we are to give it, and this needs to change. The harvest is plentiful, and there's people ready to receive it, but they're more ready to receive than we are to give. It's kind of shocking. We've got to get on our mission. When the harvest is ripe, if you don't harvest it, what happens to it? It rots. It dies. The profit that was to be gained is lost. I was listening to a guy this week. His name was Penn Jillette. I don't know if you know him. I didn't before today, but I saw this video of Penn Jillette. He's a comedian. He's a bit of an identity. Anyway. Doesn't matter. He said this. He's an atheist. He's not like a raging atheist, but he's an atheist. And he said this: if you believe Christ is the giver of eternal life with God, then you really, really must hate someone to not tell them so. And so I watched this video because one of his fans had given him a Bible. And he said, I respect this man. He was a good man. He is one of the most courageous Christians I've met because he was willing to tell me what he believed. And this is him saying in his video, I'm kind of paraphrasing, I'm so honoured that he cared enough about me to share the gospel with me. There is a true believer. There is someone with faith. Now, this is an atheist guy saying, now I still don't believe in God, but that man was a good man and he has convictions and he would be my friend. I get all tingly even thinking about it. There is an atheist saying, if you believe in the things of Christ and that eternal life with God is through him, then you've got to hate someone not to share it because that is important. So what is it with us? Is it a problem with the product? Is Jesus got a problem in the 21st century? Is it like, it's kind of like a Kodak film. It's kind of outdated and not relevant anymore. I don't think it is. It's not a problem with the product, is it? It's a problem with our attitude. It's a church problem. It's us. Let's bring it even down. It's a problem with my attitude to sharing my faith. It's a problem with your desire, attitude to sharing faith. Do you believe that Jesus is who he says he was and that he is the giver of life? Do you have enough compassion on people to tell them that, to share that with them? Do you have enough conviction to talk about that stuff? Better keep... You! I kind of talked about the big companies. So I kind of like watching companies grow, and it's a little bit of a fun thing that I kind of do that's very geekish. But that's okay. Someone described this church as a church full of geeks in a very loving way. It's okay. So I fit right in. Anyway, a lot of big companies that fail get likened to the Titanic. So I mentioned Kodak before, and there's a whole bunch of them. Remember Compaq computers? They stopped in 2015, done, finished. Like the Titanic, they're so big and you think they're indestructible, and then they back away. They die. They don't change, or something doesn't work. Anyway, I don't want to get over dramatic, okay? Frank, to be quite truth, this was one of the analogies that they gave me in the product, and it's a good analogy. But when I speak, I rather like to speak to encourage people to get on board rather than to scold for not doing a good enough job. So this is a little bit awkward for me, but anyway, let's do it. Is that a little bit like the Titanic? Maybe. If you look at all the figures, it certainly would suggest so. In fact, when I was in, where did I come from? Victoria, and forgot that place pretty quick, didn't I? But I just haven't been here long enough. I know that the BUV, Baptist Union of Victoria, when you become a pastor down there, they say, don't let your secular skills lapse. If you've got licenses, keep them up. If you're studying something, keep studying it. Because the harsh reality is that there is going to be less and less and less paid pastoral work in the future. And the reality is that most pastors if they're being paid at all, will be at least only part-time. So they say, keep your professional skills going. That is the direction the world is heading. I'd assume that Queensland is no different, if not maybe a few years not as advanced. Anyway, don't worry about that. But I didn't say that as well. Not advanced, that's a terrible way of putting that. But anyway, so here's the church, because all the statistics say that the church is looking like the Titanic, yeah? So the Titanic was a big, monstrous boat. I've got a picture of it. No, it's not very monstrous. Anyway, have a listen to this. 270 metres long, so it's nearly as long as 2 AFL football fields. It's quite big. Could carry 3,000 people. Now, I know for you, what do you call yourselves? Cruisers, that 3,000 people ain't a lot of, it's not a big ship anymore. But it was back then. This stuff was like cutting edge. 16, no less, watertight compartments below. The thing was unsinkable. It was marketed as unsinkable. Now, you all know the story really well. On its maiden voyage, it sunk. I probably said that with a laugh, and I shouldn't, because the whole thing was just tragic. But I wonder what we would have said about the Christian church in Australia 60 years ago. Unsinkable? Maybe. I wasn't here. So it sank. Only 700 people survived out of 2,223 passengers. But the greater tragedy of the whole story, they made films out of this stuff, is that not that so many died, is that so few were rescued. So of the 20 lifeboats that were dropped, only 2 were filled to capacity. The rest of them were about half full, and 1 had 5 people in it. So as the ship broke in half, there were quite literally thousands of people floating with life jackets on, alive. How many boats turned to rescue their fellow neighbours, their fellow companions, their friends, their family members? 1, lifeboat 14, was the only one that turned around to save someone. Everyone else was off in their boat, consoling themselves, just at a safe enough distance so as not to be concerned, not to be hurt, not to be caused by the distraught cries. Maybe they were. Everyone else was just consoling themselves, thanking God that they were saved, that they were no longer in the ocean staring at death. Did it occur to them to go back? Maybe they had fights on there about what to do, but they didn't go back. They stayed their safe distance. They protected themselves for a genuine fear. I get that we could be swamped. I understand that, but they protected themselves. How could they sit there in the safety of the boats while their friends and their neighbours dying? An interesting side story to this is that there was another ship in the vicinity of the Titanic that night. It was 12 miles away, and they actually saw the emergency flares go up, saying, the distress flares. Now, this ship had a communications dude. I wrote it down. What's he called? A telegraph. Anyway, can't see it. Telegraph officer. But he'd gone to bed. So the crew in the cabin that saw the fireworks chose to ignore the distress. It wasn't fireworks, chose to just ignore them, and they had no action. So in the days after the tank, there was a Senate committee that was just going through the Titanic tragedy. And that other ship, by the way, was called the Californian. And this is what the Senate committee wrote about this boat that didn't go to rescue or not respond to those emergency flares. In our opinion, such conduct, whether arising from indifference or gross carelessness, is most reprehensible. They failed to respond with the, I'm going to say dictates, but anyway, it might be Old English. They failed to respond with the dictates of humanity, international usage, and requirements of law. Had assistance been promptly preferred, that ship might have had the proud distinction of rescuing the passengers and crew of the Titanic. Whether it was arising from indifference or gross carelessness, it's most reprehensible. What an indictment. But the same can be said for us if we don't have the same attitude, if we don't have the same desire to go and speak the life of Jesus, to speak, to evangelize, to join in on the mission that we're here for. They failed to act. There was another boat that was 58 miles away that didn't make it in time, and all those people floating in the life jackets, they didn't drown, they died of hypothermia. They were completely rescuable. So are the people that live on the Gold Coast. So are the people that live in your street, your neighbours, your work colleagues, your family and your friends. I'm going to read a poem. It's quite long and I recognise I've gone over time. I don't know where the lines, hey Hannah, I don't know where the lines change in here, so can you follow along as best you can? I've never heard this poem. It's called I Stand at the Door by Stan Schoenmaker. I'm going to read the poem, then I'm going to close. I stand at the door. I neither go too far in nor stay too far out. The door is the most important door in the world. It is the door through which men walk when they find God. There is no use my going way inside and staying in there when so many are still outside and they, as much as I, crave to know where the door is. And all that so many ever find is only the wall where the door ought to be. They creep along the wall like blind men with outstretched, groping hands, feeling for a door, knowing there must be a door, yet they never find it, so I stand by the door. The most tremendous thing in the world is for men to find the door to God. The most important thing that any man can do is to take hold of one of those blind, groping hands and put it to the latch that only clicks and opens to the man's own touch. Men die outside the door as starving beggars die on cold nights in cruel cities in the dead of winter. Die for want of what is within their grasp. They live on the other side of it. Live because they have not found it. Nothing else matters compared to helping them find it and open it and walk in and find him, so I stand by the door. Go in, great saints, go in all the way. Go way down to the cavernous cellars and way up to the spacious attics. It is a vast, roomy house, this house of God is. Go into the deepest of hidden casements, of withdrawal, of silence, of sainthood. Some must inhabit those inner rooms and know the depths and the heights of God and call outside to the rest of us how wonderful it is. Sometimes I take a deeper look in, sometimes I venture in a little further, but my place seems closer to the opening, so I stand by the door. There is another reason why I stand there. Some people get part way in and become afraid, lest God and the zeal of his house devour them. For God is so very great, and he asks all of us. And these people feel a cosmic claustrophobia and want to get out. Let me out, they cry. And the people way inside only terrify them more. Somebody must be by the door to tell them that they are spoiled. For the old life, they have seen too much. One taste of God, and nothing but God will do anymore. Somebody must be watching for the frightened who seek to sneak out where they came in, to tell them how much better it is inside. The people too far in do not see near. These are to leaving, preoccupied with the wonder of it all. Somebody must watch for these who have entered the door, but would like to run away. So for them too, I'll stand by the door. Now, I admire the people who go way in, but I wish they could not forget what it was like before they got in. Then they would be able to help the people who have not yet even found the door, or the people who want to run away from God. You can go in too deeply and stay in too long and forget the people outside the door. As for me, I shall take my old accustomed place. near enough to God to hear him, to know he's there, but not so far from men as to not hear them. And remember that they are there too. Where? They're outside the door. Thousands of them, millions of them, but more importantly for me, one of them, two of them, 10 of them, whose hands I intend to put on the latch. So I shall stand by the door and wait for those who seek it. I'd rather be a doorkeeper. So I stand by the door. You know, life is short. We're here for a reason. We've got a mission. He left us here. He didn't zap us home. He left us here to be a witness of him. And the world needs us. Australia needs us. Queensland, Reedy Creek, your street and your workmates, your family members. They need you. They need you to show them the door. Isaiah says, how beautiful on the mountain are the feet of those who bring good news, to proclaim to Zion, your God reigns. Are your feet like Jesus? Are they as beautiful as Jesus? They can be when we start witnessing him to our people behind the door. Let's pray.